Thank you for joining the session. I'm registered psychotherapist practicing in Ontario, and every day I'm trying to share some useful strategies and questions, evidence-based approaches that might help you to improve your mental well-being and cope with stress and challenges. Today we will be discussing about the concept called learned helplessness. Maybe at some point in your life you said something like this to yourself, that nothing's gonna change, I'm just unlucky, no matter what I do, nothing works, and you felt as if you were hopeless. And if these sentences sound familiar, today's topic is exactly about that. In psychology, this phenomenon is called learned helplessness, and learned helplessness generally occurs when people repeatedly experience failure, rejection, lack of control, and eventually they stop trying altogether. And even when change becomes possible, then mind convinces them that effort is pointless. And the concept was first introduced by psychologist Martin Seligman. In his experiments, he observed that when people were exposed to uncontrollable situations for a long time, they eventually stopped trying to escape, even when escape later became possible. And there is this well-known experiment with the fleas in a glass jar, and close to the lid, they immediately start jumping, trying to escape. But every time they jump, they hit the lid, and again, and they try, and this hit they hit that barrier over and over again. And after a while, something interesting happens. The fleas begin to adjust how they jump. So they learn to jump as below the lid, so they don't hit it anymore. Now imagine that the lid is removed, and the jar, even if the jar is completely open, nothing is stopping them anymore, and they could easily jump out. However, they don't, because they continue jumping only to the height that learned before. They stay inside the jar, not because they can't escape, but because they believe they can't. Sometimes we do something very similar in our lives. Maybe we tried something many times and it didn't work. And when we are faced with rejection, criticism, or disappointment, and after a while, our mind begins to create an invisible lead. It tells us, don't try again, it won't work. But here is the important question. Is the lead still there? Sometimes the barrier that stopped us in the past is no longer present, but the only thing that left is the belief that it is. So today, I invite you to consider something. What's one area in your life where you may have stopped jumping as high as you once did, and what might happen if you tried one more time, just a little higher? The same mechanism appears in humans. Sometimes someone might experience repeated rejection, constant criticism, or situations where effort didn't seem to matter, and over time, our brain begins to send messages trying is useless. And this is where behavior begins to change, and we stop trying and doing things we used to enjoy or we wanted to do. A person who once fought for opportunities may start withdrawing. Someone who used to take risks may now stay in their comfort zone. And even when a new opportunity appears, a voice inside might say it won't work anyway. And the difficult part about learned hopelessness is that the problem is often not the lack of opportunity, but the problem is the mind that no longer sees any opportunities. And learned helplessness doesn't only appear in careers, it can also appear in relationships, health, and personal growth. And some people avoid new relationships after repeated emotional pain. Others stop trying to improve their health after multiple failed attempts. And human brain tends to generalize from past experiences. If control felt impossible before, the brain assumes it will always be impossible. And just because control wasn't possible in the past doesn't mean that it's not possible now. And the first step to overcome learned helplessness is increasing your awareness and noticing these thoughts that might be a barrier for you to take steps, and to notice the belief that you have developed as a result of failures and challenges. Sometimes we can ask ourselves, is this truly impossible, or is my mind telling me that it is? And once you notice that this is just a thought, and once you notice how your thoughts have shaped your behavior, it will be easier to adjust and to try to change this pattern. If someone who believed in you completely looked at this situation, what do you think they might see and say about this situation that might be possible? Can you remember a time when something felt impossible, but you managed to move forward anyway? What helped you then? What strengths do you have that could help you challenge the idea that it's impossible? And who in your life might already believe this is more that this is more possible than you think? Another study with the flies cope with uncontrollable stress by learned helplessness was done by Zhenhang Yang, Reinhard Wolf, and Martin Heisenberg in the Journal of Current Biology. And according to their research, they exposed fruit flies to a stressful situation involving heat. When a fly could control the heat, for example, by moving, it quickly learned to escape it. But when the heat appeared independently of the fly's behavior, meaning nothing the fly did could change it, the flies eventually stopped trying to escape. And what happened afterward is that after repeated exposure to uncontrollable stress, the flies reduced their activity, they walked more slowly, they took longer and more frequent rest periods, and researchers described this state as similar to learned helplessness, where animal learns that its behavior has no effect on outcomes and therefore stops trying. So the second step is rediscovering small areas of control and focusing on things you can change and where you can take small steps. Helplessness grows when we feel powerless, and even small actions can restore a sense of control. It can be a small step, small decision, small success, and each one teaches the brain that you are safe, that a change is possible, that you are capable. And suppose you begin to feel more capable and hopeful. What would be the first small sign that this were different and this was happening? And what would you notice about yourself doing differently during these days? If you woke up tomorrow feeling a little bit more hopeful, what would be the first thing that you might notice about your morning? And what feelings might start to show up more often? Who around you might notice these changes? And what would you tell that you are moving in the direction that you hoped for? The next step is changing the internal narrative. People experiencing learned helplessness often speak to themselves in absolute terms, such as, I always fail, nothing works for me. But a healthier voice says something different, that this may be difficult, but it's still possible to try. Can you remember a time when you felt a little more capable and hopeful than you do now, or you felt hopeless or that nothing was gonna work, but when you have tried, eventually things moved in a positive manner and you made progress and things started to change? What was happening in your life at that time? What were you doing differently then? Which strategies did you use? Which resources did you use for this to happen, and what difference did it create in your life in that situation, and what difference it had on other people around you? How might the strengths you already used before that help you to move forward, feeling more capable again, might help you in this situation to achieve the goals you want to achieve? And what part of that past success could you try now, even in a small way? Think about something in your life that you have stopped trying for a long time ago, and maybe it's applying for something, starting something, or speaking up. And ask yourself, is it truly impossible, or does it only feel impossible because you're afraid to try again? And many people realize that something surprising when they ask this question. The door may still be not. The door may not actually be closed. Maybe it's still open, but we just stopped trying. We just stopped knocking. And learned helplessness is a powerful psychological pattern, but it can change. The brain is capable of learning again through new experiences and small successes, and by increasing your awareness. Remember that helplessness is often not really itself, it's the shadow left behind the past experiences. If this video resonated with you, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and write your questions in the comments. Is there something in your life that you have stopped trying but might consider trying again? I hope this time was useful for you, and I would like to see you in next videos. Take care of yourself.